Welcome to The Explainer. So today we are unpacking a truly fascinating, honestly kind of radical text written back in 2017 by an author named Xu Veng. The core premise we're diving into is this wild take on human potential. It's the idea that your physical zip code, your daily surroundings, literally your immediate environment, that is what strictly dictates your ultimate spiritual ceiling. According to the source material, becoming a celestial being or a Buddha, well, it isn't just about what's in your heart. It is fundamentally about where you physically place yourself. It's a bold philosophy, for sure, and we're going to break down exactly how this text argues that our environment shapes our soul. All right, let's jump right into section 1, the power of environment. The author builds this fascinating argument starting with something we can all relate to, right? Our physical traits and tastes. The text points out that people from Shanxi love vinegar, while folks from Sichuan are all about spicy food. But the author argues this isn't some inherent personal trait. No, it's entirely dictated by the environment. If someone who doesn't even like vinegar moves to Aksu in Xinjiang, they'll actually start to crave it. If a Shanxi native moves all the way to Canada, they lose that taste completely. And the text goes even further into health. It notes that spending time in Vanuatu makes high blood pressure just vanish. Moving to a desert, arthritis disappears. Relocating to Harare, Zimbabwe reduces asthma. The author is laying the groundwork here, basically saying, look, if physical health and taste are completely governed by our location, then our spiritual health absolutely must be bound by those exact same rules. And this perfectly illustrates how the author applies this environmental rule to human greatness. Just think about names like Zhukov, Montgomery, Eisenhower, and Marshall. I mean, these are some of the most famous military heroes in modern history. But the text proposes a really stark reality about them. These figures were created entirely by the turbulent environment of the Second World War. You know how the saying goes, the times produce their heroes? Well, the author insists that without that specific, chaotic environment, every single one of these legendary figures would have just been submerged in normal mortal life. They would have remained completely ordinary. The environment was the absolute, undeniable prerequisite for their greatness. Moving on to section 2, spiritual and living spaces. Okay, so the absolutely crucial point here is understanding this two-part system the author lays out. First off, there's the internal environment, which the text beautifully calls the soul garden. Constructing this immaculate inner soul garden is the essential first step. But, and honestly, this is the massive turning point in the source material, the author insists that a beautiful inner soul garden is practically useless if it isn't paired with a very, very specific external living environment. To actually achieve enlightenment, to reach that advanced state of a celestial being or Buddha, the external world has to perfectly match the internal one. Which brings us to section 3, obstacles to spiritual growth. So the source material uses this really vivid metaphor to drop a pretty shocking claim. Everyday human lifestyles are fundamentally incompatible with spiritual elevation. The text points out that Thomas Edison once literally sat on an egg hoping to hatch it. The result? Total failure, obviously. Because a human sitting on an egg simply doesn't provide the right environmental conditions to hatch a chicken. The author uses this to argue that trying to achieve enlightenment while living within a traditional marriage and family structure is just as impossible. The environment simply lacks the required conditions. You just can't hatch a chicken like that. And wow, the text definitely does not hold back on this comparison. The author draws a really stark analogy, arguing that marriages and families are environments custom designed to birth mortals and laymen. They're literally compared to a garbage dump. A garbage dump is the perfect environment for breeding mosquitoes and flies, but it is completely incapable of breeding bees. In this philosophy, a traditional family environment simply cannot produce a celestial being. The text bluntly concludes that a person trying to achieve a Buddha state while living in a conventional marriage is just dreaming. To quote the text directly, and I love this visual, if you can become a celestial or Buddha in a marriage, a donkey can fly a plane. No way, right? And it's not just family life that gets flagged as a toxic environment for the soul. Corporate bosses, government officials, the wealthy elite, according to the text, these individuals are so hopelessly tangled in endless annoyances, daily worries, and obligations that they have absolutely zero capacity for true enlightenment. The required state of mind just cannot exist amidst that kind of stress. In fact, the author asserts that people living in these high-stress, wealthy, or powerful environments are actually lucky if they don't end up cultivating themselves into a devil. Next up, section 4, 8 conditions for celestial life. So all of this begs the question, if the everyday world is fundamentally broken for spiritual growth, what does the perfect environment actually look like? Well, the source material provides a highly specific 8-point checklist. Let's dive into it. Let's run through these 8 stark conditions.
First, absolutely no worries about the basics: food, clothing, housing, or aging. Second, zero stress, responsibilities, or obligations. Third, a beautiful environment with perfect weather. Fourth, the absolute freedom to act in accordance with your nature without any barriers. Fifth, ample time for relaxation, beautiful scenery, and playmates. Sixth, an environment completely free of risk, crisis, or noise. Seventh, and this is a huge one, zero conventional human relationships or courtesy calls for reciprocity. And finally, number 8, absolutely no idol worship, administrative orders, or control. Notice the overwhelming theme here? It's the complete and total absence of conventional societal friction and administrative restraint.
Section 5. Designing the ultimate environment. The author actually points to history to validate this 8-point checklist. The text makes this really interesting observation. Most famous scenic places are occupied by temples in this world. Have you ever wondered why that is? Well, according to the source, monasteries and Taoist temples were deliberately built in these remote, visually stunning locations with optimal feng shui for a very practical reason. The spiritual leaders who founded these places understood they absolutely needed to secure an exact, noise-free, and isolated living environment. They knew that without physically stepping out of the mortal environment, cultivating the soul into a celestial being would be literally impossible. And this brilliantly illustrates the ultimate conclusion of the author's work. The text notes that after more than 10 years of writing over 3,000 articles, we are talking 10 million words here. This entire philosophy can be distilled into this single striking premise. The spiritual environment must be created by oneself, and the living environment must be created collectively. So you build your inner soul garden, but you must find and collectively maintain a physical environment that actually supports it. If you manage to place yourself in that perfect, frictionless environment for a sufficient period of time, the author basically guarantees that you will inevitably achieve enlightenment. Which leaves us with this final, provocative thought to reflect on. Based on the philosophy we've unpacked in this explainer, take a good look around you right now. Is your current zip code, your daily routine, your family structure, and your career really shaping you into what you actually want to become? Or, like the author suggests, is your environment quietly dictating a ceiling on your potential? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope this breakdown offered a fascinating new perspective on how our surroundings might just shape our soul.